That's right, everybody. Hold on to your butts. It's time for another year of my NFL quarterback tears. And when I say tears, I'm not talking about tears from your eyes. I am not crying right now. Stop saying that I'm crying. Seriously, stop. The video will begin right after this. Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, DraftKings. Well, everybody, I want to say congratulations. We have done it. We are officially into the NFL season. I know it was a long and strenuous offseason, but you guys are all heroes and we've made it. And one of the great things about the NFL season is that every single fan base every year feels like they have a chance at winning the Lombardi Trophy. But for right now, I'm going to tell you about a great offer that DraftKings has for you. New customers who bet just $5 will get $300 instantly in bonus bets and also $200 off Sunday ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. All you got to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use my promo code Barry. And folks, let me tell you, if there's one thing that DraftKings and YouTube TV have in common, it's that they're both worth it. And don't forget about Sunday ticket. So what are you waiting for? Once again, new customers bet just $5 and get $300 instantly in bonus bets and $200 off Sunday ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Don't forget to download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use my promo code Barry. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Tier 1, rookies. It makes sense that in the rookie category, I start off with this year's first overall pick, Cam Ward. Basically, all I need to know is that Cam Ward has the ability to be a very good quarterback, and if he is able to somehow make the Titans relevant again, then he will be quite possibly the greatest athlete in sports history, and I'm not joking, because everybody who goes to the Titans immediately becomes irrelevant. But I believe if there's anybody that could turn the fortunes of that franchise around, it's this guy. Jackson Dart. More like Jackson Fart, am I right? Now, look, obviously, I am an Eagles fan, so I'm biased, I guess, when it comes to a Giants quarterback being good, but here's the deal. Who knows if Dart is even going to play or when he's going to play, because Russell Wilson is the entrenched starter, but Dart is the backup. Either way, when you watch his film, he's got a big arm, he's got some great deep ball throws, but he did seem turnover prone. He seems to be an upbeat guy. I wouldn't be surprised if his career turns out to be something like Drew Lock, which might not make Giants fans happy, but he dominated in the preseason. But guess who else dominated in the preseason? That's right, Daniel Jones. I'm just saying, you're going to call me a hater or whatever, but you don't want to get your hopes up. I'm just telling you, Giants fans, so you don't break your hearts again. But he does have some good highlights, and he does have a big arm, but I think he's going to be a Drew Lock type of quarterback. That's just what my gut tells me. Call me a hater and complain all you want, but I'm usually right more than I'm wrong. Moving on to Tyler Shuck. That's right, the fact that this guy has the last name Shuck when his name looks like Show is already a big red flag to me. His numbers at Louisville weren't great, but he does have some really impressive highlight throws, scrambling out of the pocket, throwing on the run, that make me think, hey, maybe he's going to be at least a respectable starter at some point. I mean, the Saints, they can take anything they want at this point. He's not even the starter currently. That belongs to Spencer Rattler. J.J. McCarthy. Yes, I'm including McCarthy in the rookies tier still because he hasn't actually played an NFL game yet, even though he technically is a sophomore. But yeah, it's just typical, similar to a redshirt freshman, basically. What we know about McCarthy is that when he was at Michigan, he was on a loaded team and he was a game manager. And honestly, he's fallen into probably the best possible scenario offensively for a first-time quarterback with the Vikings. So he should put up good numbers and he shouldn't be asked to do too much. He has some nice tools, but if Sam Darnold can look good with the Vikings, then I wouldn't be surprised if he has good numbers that make him look better than he actually is. Dylan Gabriel. This is a guy, he's an experienced veteran. He played for like 4 colleges and he has insane college stats, particularly last year at Oregon. If it seems like I'm just kind of word salading through these rookie quarterbacks, it's because I kind of am, because it's difficult because we don't know how many of these guys are actually going to respond to live action. That's part of the excitement of football, is the uncertainty around it. I'm obviously putting him here because I don't think that Joe Flacco is going to last the entire season, or maybe even half the season as the Browns starting quarterback. And I have no doubt that once Gabriel gets into play, he'll probably end up struggling like every other Browns quarterback has since they came back in 1999. But I believe he's going to play more than his teammate, Shedeur Sanders. Now, Sanders gets a lot more publicity than really any of his other teammates do, despite the fact he is the 3rd string quarterback for the Browns, and that's not even including if Deshaun Watson is going to come back. Sanders, for being the son of Deion Sanders, ironically, isn't a very mobile quarterback. quarterback. He seems to have some accuracy, but he doesn't really have any outstanding physical traits. I don't think he should have fallen to the 5th round the way he did, but there's nothing when you watch his film or his highlights that make you go, wow. So if he does get into a game or two this season, I would not expect a lot. Maybe he can grind out a long Brian Hoyer type career as a spot starter backup, but I know he has a lot of fans who think he's going to be a future superstar, and that's not going to happen. I'm telling you right now. Sorry. Tier 2, scrubs. Joe Flacco, one of the few elder statesmen left in the NFL, along with Aaron Rodgers. Flacco hasn't started more than half a season since 2017, so I don't expect this season to go any differently. However, the only time really in the last 11 plus years where he actually looked somewhat competent was the last couple games when he was with Kevin Stefanski and the Browns a couple years ago, but the environment has changed, and in a way I'm still surprised that he is going, but I guess he's just kind of like a cockroach that you just can't kill. But overall, yes, I would not expect much from Mr. 2012 Super Bowl MVP Flacco at this point. Bryce Young. I understand immediately that Panthers fans are going to talk about when Bryce Young came back, he was better, and like I said in my other video in regards to Bryce Young, the bar was literally in hell. So he went from being one of the worst quarterbacks and one of the biggest draft busts ever to being a little less dog shit. His numbers since he came back from the benching, he started 10 games and he had a passer rating of 88.9, which is not bad. It's average, a little bit below average, but Panthers fans, I think you're clinging on to a little bit of false hope if you're going to go off of the last few games of last season, where he did admittedly look pretty good, but using 3-game sample sizes to say that a guy has turned his career around, especially in meaningless games where there's no stakes or pressure, I'd be very wary of that. We all know my issues with Bryce Young at this point. He doesn't have a great arm. He's small. He doesn't have big hands, so he loses control of the football easily. I don't know how he went first overall. I guess Nick Saban must have slipped some of the scouts some money, but either way, I just think after this year, Panthers are going to be looking for another quarterback, because Bryce Young, in games that matter, where there are actual stakes, he still hasn't proven anything through 2 years, and I don't think that's going to change. We get to Daniel Jones now, who is the starter for the Colts. Daniel Jones, among really all the quarterbacks over the last 5 or 6 years, ever since he got drafted, he's probably been the worst full-time starter in the league. And somehow he was able to get a starting spot once again on the Colts. But we all know Daniel Jones's flaws, which are essentially everything besides running the ball, which is funny because he's white. But the fact that he was able to win the Colts starting job really shows more about how inept and dire their situation is, and also how bad the next player on this list, Anthony Richardson, must be for a team to pick him in the top 4 and then not even 2 years later say you can't beat out Daniel Jones. The thing with Richardson is that his highlights are literally, you can see why he was picked 4th overall. And I say this unironically, he might have the strongest arm I've ever seen. It's unbelievable, his throws and velocity. Unfortunately, a lot of his throws don't go to their intended target, but when they are online and accurate, my God, he's amazing to watch. His highlights are unbelievable. Unfortunately, he is not good. So I believe him and Daniel Jones are going to be alternating for the Colts at quarterback this year. And again, considering he couldn't beat out Daniel Jones in training camp, despite having all the reasons and leverage that a 4th overall pick should have, I think he's going to be gone from the Colts after this year. Spencer Rattler. I've said that Spencer Rattler is really only in the NFL because if you're standing 100 yards away from him, he kind of looks like Patrick Mahomes physically. He's one of those quarterbacks that in the warm-up line when you're throwing footballs, he looks great, but then the game starts and his weaknesses become pretty apparent. He was supposed to be great in college. He wasn't great at Oklahoma. He wasn't great at South Carolina. He's got a pretty decent arm, but he just isn't the guy. He's just a spot starter, and just like the Colts and really every other team that's in this category with the scrubs are probably going to be looking for a new quarterback after this season, or in Rattler's case, Tyler Shuck might take his spot after a few games. I wouldn't be surprised about that, and that's kind of what I expect, to be honest with you. Justin Fields. There's a lot of uncertainty in the NFL, but one of the few certainties is that if you play quarterback for the Bears, Jets, or the Browns, there's basically a 99% chance you're going to suck. Justin Fields, as a scrambler and a runner, is legitimately great, and I don't say that facetiously. He is an unbelievable runner. He has a rocket arm. The physical tools are there, but again, much like Anthony Richardson, and I would say that although both of them stink, I think he is slightly better than Anthony Richardson. He's the type of guy that he'll make a couple couple plays a game that'll just keep you believing in him and saying, maybe he's finally turned a corner, but you end up losing. And historically, he's been really bad late in close games. So unless you're a team with a dominant defense or an above average defense and can control the clock, much like the Steelers did last year before he got benched for Russell Wilson, you're not going to win a lot of games with Justin Fields as your starter because he's just not very good. Tier 3, too soon to tell. Now remember, too soon to tell doesn't mean necessarily that player is going to be bad. That's what it is. It's like a mystery box. Again, could be anything at this point. And that's why I'm starting with Michael Penix Jr., even though he only started the last 3 games of the season last year after taking over for Kirk Cousins. I believe that Penix has the right stuff. I looked at his film. He made a ton of great throws, and he also made some high pressure throws late in close games while the Falcons were still in the playoff race. And so they didn't win, particularly against Washington late in the season, but I don't fault Penix for that. Also, yes, his last name does sound like penis, which is just inevitable. It's the elephant in the room. We have to address it. I'm sorry, but it has to be addressed, and so I just did that. But I think this guy's ability to make great throws, stay in the pocket, stand in the pocket, are all very, very good. It's just the sample size of 3 games. Again, I just said 3 games is not a big enough sample size for Bryce Young, so I'm going to be fair here. But my gut, my instinct, my reflexes tell me that Penix is going to be good. But again, he does play on the Falcons, and they haven't had a good defense since the 70s. So expect him to really have a lot of good numbers and go 8-9 or 9-8, a lot like Matt Ryan was doing every year. Drake May, I compared him to Justin Herbert in past videos, and that's really what you see on film when you look at Drake May. He's a tall, white, athletic guy with a super strong arm, and his highlight throws are amazing, but the consistency just wasn't there. Again, he was playing on a really bad Patriots team last year, so it really was kind of impossible to judge him, but he still had moments that made you go, oh, I can see why they drafted him so highly and why he was so highly rated by scouts. They added Stephon Diggs, they drafted Will Campbell, so there's a little bit more support for him this year, but again, it's just kind of hard to make any grand declarations about this guy when the supporting cast is so bad or so mediocre. But then again, the best quarterbacks are able to turn mediocre supporting casts into productive supporting casts. So if Drake May is able to do that, then the Patriots might finally have their first good quarterback since Matt Castle. Caleb Williams. Whereas with other quarterbacks so far, I've kind of leaned towards they're going to be good. Caleb Williams was pretty disappointing as a rookie. Even though his touchdown interception ratio was really good, I believe that he peaked around the middle of the season, and then the last couple weeks of the year, the latter part of the season, he just was really bad. He just took way too many sacks. His timing was off. Like I said, one of the biggest weaknesses for him coming into the league and one of the biggest worries about him wasn't his physical tools or his scrambling or his arm talent. He has all that in spades. It's the fact that he takes a while to just get rid of the ball, and unless you're an Aaron Rodgers or a prime Russell Wilson, that type of play style is very, very hit or miss, and it's safe to say that Williams' rookie season was much more miss. Now, he has Ben Johnson as his head coach, and Johnson is supposed to be a quarterback whisperer who supposedly revived Jared Goff's career, so maybe it will make it easier for Caleb Williams. I don't know. I'm not going to declare that he's a bust. I think that he's too talented to give up on after just one season, but if he's still struggling with Ben Johnson and the updated offensive philosophy and concepts that he's supposed to bring compared to Matt Eberflus last year, then yes, I would be very worried as a Bears fan. And also the fact that Bears haven't had consistently great quarterback play since the 1940s would also be a bad precedent that I would worry about as a Bears fan with Caleb Williams. Bo Nix. I know that all the people who are Denver fans are probably, they want to kill me, and they say, how can you say that Bo Nix is still too soon to tell if he's good or not? He was great. He threw for 29 touchdowns last year. And this is really more so just a safe prediction by me, because honestly, I don't really know what to make of Bo Nix at this point. He's not a scrub, but he hasn't done enough for me to be considered, based on what I saw last year, the above average category. But I also feel like if I put him in the average category, Broncos fans would be pissed about that too. So you know what? You're just going to have to sit there and listen to me talk about this quarterback. I don't think he has a very high ceiling. I think he's maxed out basically, right? He's about as good as he's going to be. Sean Payton is supposedly, an offensive genius. So supposedly Sean Payton will help groom him into a superstar quarterback. And he had some nice moments last year, obviously, throwing the ball deep. And he seemed, again, he's not, from what I saw, he wasn't bad, but I still need to see more in order to say he's going to be a superstar. But I think he has at least a couple more years with the Broncos as their starter. So for Broncos fans, just be happy that for once, for the first time really in about a decade, you're not in arguably the worst quarterback situation in the entire league anymore. Tier 4, average. Kyler Murray. It's the same story every year with Kyler Murray. It really is like a broken record. If this guy played in a big media market like New York or LA, he would get a lot more shit, but because he plays in Arizona, and people get mad at me when I make these videos and I say a lot of the same stuff, and I'm like, well, because it's still true. What do you want me to say? Oh, he's actually great, and he's a future Hall of Famer, and he's a winner? Like, you want me to just, I'm not going to switch shit up just for the sake of switching it up when it's not true. Kyler Murray, we all know the deal with him. He's tiny, but he has a big arm. He can scramble, but his teams usually fall off towards the end of the season. And his production is that of, really, I would say, I guess he's a high-end average quarterback, if there is such a thing, but he's just not as good as you would expect for a guy, former first overall pick, going into his 7th season. I thought he might have turned the corner a couple years ago, but he just seems to have plateaued, and is a great example of why you don't want to declare a quarterback as arrived too soon. So he lands in the average category, much like another former first overall pick, Trevor Lawrence. It's getting pretty scary for Trevor Lawrence now, because I very easily could have put him, statistically, based on the last couple seasons, I could have said that he was a bum and he was a scrub. I wouldn't go that far. He's still capable of having the occasional good game, but like with every other video, when I talk about Trevor Lawrence, the physical tools are never in doubt. 6'6", not a super rocket arm like a Josh Allen, but a very, very plus arm, very mobile and athletic. He does have Travis Hunter, Brian Thomas Jr., so there are players around him to throw to. So it's not as if the cupboard is bare, but at this point, we're going into year 5, and he just hasn't taken that next step yet. And if he continues to put up similar numbers this year to the numbers he's put up the last couple years, I may have to dock him and put him in the scrub category. So it's obviously a big year for Lawrence and the rest of the Jaguars. Geno Smith. Unlike Kyler Murray and Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith was not a first overall pick, but he was a relatively high draft pick by the Jets, who sucked with the Jets, unsurprisingly, then bounced around for a little bit, and then became the starter for the Seahawks and took advantage of his second chance. Geno Smith, his best throws are unbelievable. His arm talent is really, really good. His tight window accuracy is really good, but unfortunately, he's a great example of why, if you were just judging quarterbacks based on their highlight reels, he might be a top 5 quarterback with some of the throws he makes. They're truly amazing, but the consistency just isn't there on a throw-by-throw basis. He seems to take a lot of sacks. It's just, nobody's afraid to play Geno Smith, even though he has the ability to make some great throws. He's a guy who, again, a couple years ago, putting him in the average category would seem super far-fetched, but he turned his career around enough to where you actually expect him to be decent at this point. And he's certainly not bad, but that's why he's in the average category, because he's not great either. And because he's now in the AFC West, which is obviously the Chiefs division and the Chargers, and even the Broncos now, the Raiders are the worst team in that division, and I think that's going to spell a pretty bad record for Geno. I don't think he's a good enough quarterback to carry a bad team to a plus 500 record, so I wouldn't be surprised to see some regression from him. Remember, he's in like his mid-30s, so he's sneaky old too. Russell Wilson, talking about another guy, it seems crazy, but Geno Smith was only drafted 1 year after Russell Wilson, who everybody thinks has been washed up for the last 4 or 5 years, or ever since he left Seattle. And there's some truth to that. He's not the monster he once was in his prime, when he was throwing 30 touchdowns and 40 touchdowns and leading double-digit win seasons where he was one of the 4 or 5 best quarterbacks in the league. That time is past. You know your career is near a close when you agree to sign with the New York Giants willingly, just like last year when he was with the Steelers. He was able to win a decent amount of games with the Steelers, but the Steelers, you know, it just, they have their own thing where it just seems like it doesn't matter who plays quarterback. They were winning 9 games with Devlin Hodges. There's just a weird thing with the Steelers where they're always going to find a way to fuck around and win 10 games, but nothing more than that, right? So Wilson's a guy, he still has great deep ball ability, but he takes too many sacks, and his indecision has grown as he's gotten older and less athletic, and he's just not good, and he's just not great anymore. I think he's still good for a couple vintage games every single year, but the time is quickly running out on him, just like the time is very quickly running out on Aaron Rodgers, who, despite not having a good season since 2021, is still one of the biggest names in the sport, because he is the elder statesman at the quarterback position in the league now. He's been starting since 2008. We all know about his resume. Let's talk about last year with the Jets. Everybody thought that it was going to be a revitalization because they had Garrett Wilson and they traded for Devontae Adams and they did all this shit with Aaron Rodgers. And unfortunately for the Jets and Rodgers, it was a perfect storm of Rodgers not coming through through in clutch time, terrible special teams kicking, and bad defense that led to a 5-12 record, Rodgers still had some pretty good moments, and he still has some arm talent. It's not anywhere near what it once was when he was younger, and he had what I think is the greatest arm ever, but he can still make all the throws, but he just takes too many sacks, and his last 2 full seasons, he's thrown over double-digit interceptions, which, when you're Aaron Rodgers, the trade-off with him used to be that he would take more sacks, but he wouldn't throw really any interceptions. He would throw like 4 or 5 interceptions a season, but he would take a lot of sacks. But now that he's gotten older, he's throwing interceptions, and he's still taking a decent amount of sacks. So when you have both of those, you get sluggish offenses, which is what he's had his last 2 full seasons. And again, the guy is 42 now. He's going to be 42 in December. He's just not the athlete and the talent that he once was. But again, he does play for the Steelers now, so they always manage to find a way to win 9 or 10 games, and I think that Rodgers is still good enough to win in that game manager role. Just don't ask him to throw 40 or so times a game like the Packers were back when he was winning MVPs, or else you will have a bad time. Sam Darnold. Darnold is here because he had his career rejuvenation with the Vikings, and based on what he did with Minnesota last year, throwing for 35 touchdowns and getting a pretty sweet deal with the Seahawks, much like the quarterback he's taking over for, Geno Smith, he was drafted by the Jets, a top 3 pick, and every now and then he'll have an amazing play that makes you go, holy shit, I can see why he was picked 3rd overall. But he's just not a guy that you trust in big moments, and we saw that again, that at the biggest moments and the brightest moments, he reverted back to being Sam Darnold, and he was horrible in the last game of the season for the division, and he was also terrible in the playoff game. And again, with the Vikings, as I mentioned with J.J. McCarthy, with the Vikings, he was in a great position in terms of the skill talent around him. Now he's going to a much worse situation in Seattle. I just don't see him coming anywhere close to the same numbers that he had with the Vikings. But it's the NFL, and he did throw 35 touchdowns, which is still relatively difficult to do, even in today's league. So he does deserve some respect for that, and so I'm not going to call him a scrub, even though everything before last year says that he's a scrub. I'm feeling very, very nice. All right, fine. I said that he's average because his grandpa's name was Dick Hammer, and I like that, okay? I think it's funny. Tier 5, above average, but maxed out. This is basically what it says. These are quarterbacks who are objectively good and can win your team some games every year on their arms, but right now they're about as good as they're ever going to be. And starting off with Dak Prescott, we all know the drill here. I say it every video. He's entering his 10th season. Last year he got hurt, but basically with Dak, we know the deal. He's a great stat patter when the game is already out of hand. He's great against bad teams. He runs up his numbers in those games, but in the big pivotal moments, whether it's in a playoff game or whether it's in a big divisional game late in the season, he usually reverts to being the 4th round pick out of Mississippi State, and that's what prevents him from being any higher than just above average. Tua Tagovailoa. I've always been more bullish on Tua than a lot of other people. I think that I like watching him play, and I think that the Dolphins struggling so much without him, it doesn't make him a legendary or great quarterback by any means, but it does speak to the fact that even though he hasn't won really any big games yet in his career and isn't a guy that you can really trust in a big game, particularly if it's not perfect weather because of his physical limitations and injury history, but he still has great numbers when he plays. He does have productive numbers, and he's the type of guy that can go on a heater and win you some games. So I think he's above average. Maybe he's on the lower tier end of my above average list. He's closer to being average than he is to being elite, obviously, but I like watching him play. I like throwing him the deep balls. So, his style of play, I guess I'm biased, whatever, but I think that he is above average. But again, because of his physical limitations, he's maxed out. Same thing with Jared Goff. His numbers are great, and I swear to God, when I watch this motherfucker, when I watch his highlights and I go through his film, he plays exactly like you know who. And everybody who follows me, we all know exactly who I'm talking about because I really hate him, but it's insane how he plays, and his throws are exactly like you know who. It's boring, it's methodical, but it's effective. The question with Goff, really, despite being another 1st overall pick formerly, is all of his success in his entire career, whenever he's done well, first it was attributed to Sean McVay, and then he goes to the Lions, and he has some good years with the Lions, and now people are saying that's because of Ben Johnson. So even with Goff, it's like, he's good, I guess, but every time he's been good, somebody else has always gotten the credit. So is he underrated? Maybe a little bit, but as we saw last year in the playoffs versus Washington, despite the fact that he has been one of the better regular season quarterbacks for the last couple years, he still is not trustworthy in big games, but he seems to have settled in nicely with Detroit, and he's been playing playing very well in recent memory, so he is in the above average category, but this is about as good as he's ever going to get. Jordan Love. Jordan Love is going into his 6th NFL season. I understand he's only been a starter for 2 of them, believe me. And no, I'm not going to make my Jeff Garcia comparison to him. I know somebody in the comments in my last video was always talking about, you always make that same comparison, blah, blah, blah. Even though it's pretty accurate, I will not make that comparison in this video. I don't really know what to make of Jordan Love. His raw numbers are nice, but when you watch him play, again, I wasn't afraid to play against Jordan Love. And I'm not that I played against him, but when my team was playing against him, the Eagles, it's kind of like, yeah, he's good, but he doesn't really instill fear into you. And I know the Packers made that big splash with Micah Parsons, supposedly, but I wasn't really moved by the Micah Parsons trade because I still don't think Jordan Love is that great. I don't think he's terrible, but he's inconsistent, and he seems to think he has a much stronger arm than he actually does. He throws up a lot of YOLO balls, which are fun to watch, but, you know, when you talk about judging quarterbacks, there's a little bit of luck involved. He already has a couple playoff meltdowns on his resume, and again, I say this, I think because the previous 2 quarterbacks in Green Bay were both all-time greats, I think people are expecting him to take this other leap into all-time great category, and that's just kind of like a hot hand fallacy a little bit, where, oh, this happened a couple times before, so now it's going to happen again, and that's just not how it works. And I think we've seen good player, not a great player, and I think he pretty accurately lands here. However, both Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers did win their only Super Bowls in their 6th season at age 27. And right now, Jordan Love is 27 and going into his 6th season. So if he ever is going to win a Super Bowl, now would be the time. Matthew Stafford, one of the elder statesmen, him, Rodgers, Flacco, and really, I guess, Russell Wilson are a few of the only old quarterbacks still left. And Geno Smith, sneaky, because he was 2013. But Stafford, this offseason, there's been rumors that, you know, his back has been really bad and all of this stuff. And I always make the joke every time, but like he unironically might need to take a lot of back shots. Him and Micah Parsons are both going to take a lot of back shots in order to play. And the arm talent's always there with Stafford. You know, it's always been there. We all know about his arm. Since he's gone to the Rams, whenever he's made the playoffs and he's been in playoff games, he's been pretty good. The Rams by far gave the Eagles their toughest test last year in the postseason. They were pretty close to nearly beating them. So Stafford, when he gets into the playoffs, very similar to Eli in that sense, at least most of the time. But he's actually, you know, I take that back. He's actually a lot better in the playoffs than Eli was. The problem is getting there. And he's older and he's had some injuries, and the game, the longevity and the miles might be adding up on him now. So he might miss a couple games, and he's always going to be struggling with inconsistency. He's never been a truly elite quarterback, despite having elite quarterback traits, but he's absolutely above average, and he offers consistency, right? In a weird way. He's consistent in that he's inconsistent, but you always know that if he starts a season, you're going to be getting 25 touchdowns and a 94, 95-ish passer rating, so you're going to get above average quarterback play. Just don't expect him to be an elite quarterback, and you'll be pretty pleased. Baker Mayfield. This was a somewhat difficult one for me to judge, because with Baker, just a couple years ago, everybody was saying that he's done for, he's washed up, he's been on 4 teams in 3 years when he got to Tampa, and he's turned his career around, and he had over 40 touchdown passes last year, although he did lead the league in interceptions, tied with Kirk Cousins. But again, I think that when you play like Baker and you're aggressive and you really push the ball downfield a lot, there's a give and take with that, and there's some reward with that, and I think in the end, that helps the Buccaneers more than it hurts. As long as he's not throwing 30 interceptions a year like Jameis Winston was, the Buccaneers, I think, have a really good roster. They should have a very good offense again. I know they lost their offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, to the Jaguars, but I don't think that will be a big deal. Like I say, the good quarterbacks get coordinators hired, and bad quarterbacks get coordinators fired. And Baker, because of his good play, was able to get his offensive coordinator a head coaching job. Baker also, much like Stafford, whenever he has gotten into the postseason, has played really, really well for the most part. Again, the problem just has been getting there, but in his 2 years with Tampa, they've both made the playoffs each year, but they still haven't gotten to a conference championship game, although they have won more games each of the last 2 years than they did in 2022 with that overrated old quarterback quarterback who was most likely allegedly taking money under the table and using HGH, but I forget his name. Either way, Baker Mayfield, he's short. He's basically kind of like what Kyler Murray is supposed to be. They're both Oklahoma Heisman Trophy winners, but they're both shorter with big arms, but Baker's a lot better. Now, to be fair, Baker does have some good weapons around him, but overall, I think you can see more of the same this year. Big numbers for Baker. The Buccaneers defense is going to be the most suspect part, though. So I don't know if they're going to be a first or a second seed, but I think they should win the division again. Now we get to tier 6, above average and improving. So these are guys that, just like what it says, these are guys who are above average currently, but could sneak into the elite category in time. And I start off with CJ Stroud. Now this is a little bit of a faith-based placement because in reality, CJ Stroud might belong more in the too soon to tell category because statistically, as we all know, he fell off pretty substantially from his rookie season. But just again, there are certain things that when you're watching player play every game, sometimes the stats miss things and you just have to listen to your instincts. And I think CJ Stroud is a good player. I think, like I said in a previous video, he kind of reminds me of Matt Ryan, a guy who had a great, efficient rookie season and then took a step back in his sophomore year and then got back on the right track again in year 3 and onward. And I kind of see that with CJ Stroud. I think that he's got all the physical tools. I think he's got what you look for. He stands in the pocket. He's got accuracy. He can throw on the run. He maybe takes a couple too many sacks, but again, some of that is the bad offensive line in Houston. But I think the problem in Houston is not CJ Stroud. It also helps, though, for him that he plays in probably the worst division in football. So I think, once again, the Texans should get a home wild card game. And my gut says that Stroud will bounce back and probably have 30 touchdowns and have closer efficiencies to his rookie season than his down year last year. So I'm putting my faith in CJ Stroud. I really hope he doesn't let me down. Now we get to Justin Herbert, who I almost put in the maxed out category, but I mean, to be honest, this guy, he's entering his 6th season. We all know the downside with Herbert, he still hasn't won a playoff game, and when he's been to the playoffs, he's been terrible, but he still is relatively young. And again, physically with Herbert, all the physical tools, that's never been a question. 6'6", rocket arm, can run like a deer. He probably should run more than he does, to be honest with you, in terms of a scrambler. Can make every single throw imaginable, but I guess there's just something that's preventing him from being truly elite. He seems to have some games where, not that he doesn't care, but there's some games where he just goes through a lot of dry spells where you just like, why is this happening? What am I missing exactly? And I just talked about how the good quarterbacks, they get, coordinators, bigger jobs. And Herbert is one of those guys that it always seems to be somebody else's fault. It's, Anthony Lynn is a terrible coach. And Joe Lombardi is a terrible offensive coordinator. And then Kellen Moore is a terrible offensive coordinator. And Brandon Staley was bad, and so on and so forth. And eventually, to me, it's kind of like, if you are truly the guy, if you're truly that motherfucker, it doesn't matter who your coach or your offensive coordinator is, you will be elite. And at a certain point, Herbert fans, you just kind of got to stop making excuses for him. He still is a good quarterback. That's not the debate. He is a good quarterback, which is why he's here. And he's still just young enough to where he could still take that next step, but a little bit of a tease, in my opinion. But Jim Harbaugh's teams always seem to do well, and he's certainly the most talented quarterback that Harbaugh has had at the NFL level. So I expect the Chargers to be a wild card team again this year. Brock Purdy. This is probably one of my more controversial decisions. I think Purdy's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league. I understand, he has probably below average arm strength. He's not particularly great in terms of film, but he really throws with a lot of anticipation. And people say that, he kind of has the same criticisms as Jalen Hurts does, where it's like, he's okay, I guess, but he only looks great because he's on, loaded teams. And I've never felt that was completely fair. I think that his lack of arm strength does show up sometimes, especially on deep balls. And obviously, Kyle Shanahan scheming things helps him. But last year, the 49ers just had a bunch of injuries, and I think he's still young enough. He was drafted in 2022. So he might look old and he might seem older than he actually is, but he actually is still relatively young. And I think he has some room for improvement. And if you saw my preview video, I expect the 49ers to bounce back because, again, the 49ers for the last 20 years, they've been all or nothing. They've either been completely horrible or they've been title contenders. And I think just based off of recent history, as long as they stay healthy, then I think they're going to be title contenders once again. But there's a reason I didn't put Brock Purdy in the elite category. It's because I don't think he's one of those rare guys that can win you every game, every Sunday on his own. I do think that he does need some throws schemed open because of his arm strength. But at the end of the day, he's a very productive quarterback. And he really wasn't the reason the 49ers 49ers lost the Super Bowl a couple years ago. If not for Mahomes being clutch, he would have a Super Bowl ring already. So I think he's better than he gets credit for. And now we get to Jayden Daniels. Everybody loves Jayden Daniels, especially all the analysts and the writers, and everybody seems to love Jayden. And I got nothing against Jayden. I swear he had a very good rookie season. Obviously, physically, he's obviously a great runner. If you're looking for a comparison for him in terms of what his career could end up looking like, you would say, well, Lamar Jackson, a guy who's a dominant scrambler, and he's also a very capable passer. As we saw, I don't have any reason to suspect that he won't become elite in short time, other than for health reasons. And again, I'm saying this as a rival, but there's just something about Washington where I just don't really, I don't fear Washington. I just don't fear Washington. Even if Jayden Daniels is a very good or even a great quarterback, their defense is just really mediocre, and that was their downfall last year, inevitably. They gave up 55 points to the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, and I think that's going to be their downfall again this year. No matter who you are at quarterback, doesn't matter whether you're Mahomes, Brady, Peyton, Rodgers, Breeze, Montana, Marino, any fucking quarterback you name, if your defense is shit and your defense is giving up a bunch of points regularly, you will not win anything. And that's the case, I believe, with Jayden. But he has the goods, it's just a matter of staying healthy. We get to tier 7 now, which is the elite quarterbacks. These are guys, that's what elite quarterbacks are. They can win you games single-handedly. They can make plays when everything else breaks down. And we're starting off with Lamar Jackson, who, two-time MVP winner. We all know he's one of the best regular season quarterbacks ever. Every year he's been healthy since he became a starter. He's won the division, he's won the AFC North, and he's made the playoffs. It's a broken record with Lamar. We all know the deal by now. He's proven everybody, and he's proven everything he needs to prove in the regular season. It all comes down to the playoffs and making a Super Bowl to kind of justify everybody's belief in him. But he has everything. He's got a strong arm. He's the greatest scrambler in NFL history, which used to be said in a backhanded compliment kind of way, but now I feel like more people have started to realize, hey, this guy's ability to run the ball is actually a very legitimate weapon. Last year in the playoffs, he kind of got fucked over by some big drops, particularly by Mark Andrews, and I feel like, he's a guy that if you said he's the best player in the league, and the players seem to think so, in terms of a raw individual talent, it's hard to argue against him, at least in the regular season. I still think, spoiler alert, I still think Mahomes is number one because of his consistency in the playoffs, but I think Lamar in the regular season, he has as good an argument as any for being the best quarterback in football, right along with this guy, Josh Allen, who he lost MVP to wrongly. I mean, Lamar had one of the greatest seasons ever last year, and Josh Allen, great quarterback. He's developed into a great player. He's married to, a famous hot actress now, so great for him, I guess. We all know the same thing with Allen, although both Allen and Jackson, despite all their great success and their consistency, neither of them have yet to make a Super Bowl or win a ring. Allen has been better in the playoffs than Jackson has. We all know that, but, the whole Kansas City and Mahomes have prevented him from doing anything more. But again, from a physical standpoint, 6'5", one of the strongest arms in NFL history, can run like a gazelle. He's got everything you need physically, and it's one of those things where it just seems like you're just waiting for one of these postseasons in one of these close games where he gets to avoid playing Kansas City, or one of these plays goes his way late, and that'll finally be enough to get him and the Bills over the line to get to the promised land. But again, until they actually do it, it's hard to say that he's the best when you include the postseason, until he actually does it, because it's like the opportunity was there last year and the year before, and he didn't come through. So he's with the Bills. He's a great quarterback. He's entering his prime. He's going to have more chances to finally break through and get to a Super Bowl, but he's got to do it. And I feel like until he does that, he's going to have to settle for being a top 2 or 3 quarterback instead of a top 1 quarterback. And the same thing goes for this next guy, Joe Burrow, who didn't make the playoffs last year. Now, of course, we all know that wasn't Burrow's fault, although he did have some turnovers in big moments that people forget. But again, he really didn't have a huge margin for error. My issues with Burrow have always been that he gets overrated as a clutch performer, which I still believe, particularly in the postseason. Unlike Lamar and Allen, as we both know, he's actually been to a Super Bowl, and they weren't able to close the deal there, so he's still ringless. And like I said last year, even though the Bengals missed the playoffs, the media really was touting him up, and I just feel like I said in my last video, it just feels like the media wants him to get MVP, because Lamar's got a couple, Mahomes has a couple, now Josh Allen has one, so it's like, hey, maybe it's Burrow's turn. That's kind of how I feel. So I think even if if Burrow has less productive numbers this year compared to last year, I feel like if the Bengals were able, and I predicted the Bengals to make the playoffs as a wild card team, I think that he'll win MVP as long as the Bengals make playoffs, because the media seems really eager to give him an MVP, and it's not completely unwarranted, right? Him and Jamar Chase have a truly special connection, and I think in every situation except late in close games when his team is losing, I think he's worth all the hype he gets except for that specific circumstance, which unfortunately is what a lot of people talk about, which is him being clutch and him being smooth and cool and all this stuff, and the numbers just don't support that. But overall, he's absolutely an elite quarterback, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he should be, as long as he's able to stay healthy, which has been a problem for him, but as long as he's able to stay on the field, he should be one of the best quarterbacks in the league for the next 5 to 10 years. And finally, my most controversial decision, I know, Jalen Hurts. Oh, how could you put Jalen Hurts in here? He plays on a super team, and he's a tush-push merchant, and he actually sucks. He can't throw, blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, ever since Jalen Hurts was implemented as the Eagles starting quarterback 4 years ago, this is going to be his 5th year as a full-time starter, the Eagles offenses have been elite, and they've been consistent at moving the ball and scoring a bunch of points. And Jalen Hurts individually, when you include his rushing, okay, even not including the tush-push plays, this guy just scores a bunch of touchdowns. His offenses are super efficient. Now, I fully agree with everybody that there are definitely other quarterbacks who could probably do just as well with the Eagles as he does, maybe even better, but not many. And if you're saying that Jalen needs a super team to succeed, and then, oh, well, these other guys who are supposedly better than him could also win in this situation, then you're saying that those other guys can't win without a super team either. So it's kind of a self-defeating argument. Either way, he isn't the greatest anticipatory thrower. The reason why he's not best quarterback in the league is because he doesn't have a super strong arm, but he's got a strong arm. He's a great deep ball passer. My one biggest bugaboo with Jalen, and of course, he is a great quarterback sneaker. He's a great scrambler, right? And the tush push and the quarterback sneak is a skill. Otherwise, everybody would do it. My one criticism of Jalen as a player is that he will sometimes leave clean pockets for no reason. He'll leave clean pockets too early. But this is a guy that he's a gamer, man. He's just a gamer. He shows up in big games. He plays well in big games. And yes, I fully admit he's got a great team. I'm an Eagles fan. The Eagles, I'm picking the Eagles to win the Super Bowl again this year. Jalen Hurts has a great team, but he's not this easily replaceable cog in the machine that so many non-Eagles fans seem to act like he is. He's a very, very important part of what makes the Eagles go, and I am happy to have him as my favorite team's quarterback. I wasn't always that way, but I've come around on Jalen Hurts, and more than anything, I trust him in the conference championship game and the Super Bowls more than really anybody else besides Mahomes. And maybe even Mahomes, because he's played Mahomes in 2 Super Bowls, outplayed him by a lot last year, and in my opinion, outplayed him 3 years ago too when they met, but the defense just, whatever, we've been over that. But this is a guy on the biggest stage in the sport. He's already has 2 great performances. He's an even better Super Bowl performer than even Mahomes is, but obviously when you're talking about who the best is, and for as good or as talented as all these other guys are, there's only one quarterback who is currently on pace and on the trajectory to be in the GOAT discussion, or as the GOAT, or challenging Tom Brady's spot as the consensus GOAT, which in my opinion he's not. Brady's overrated, and that's where we get to Patrick Mahomes. And it's no surprise, and I fully understand that the last couple regular seasons his numbers have been down, and that's why I said, if he has another somewhat mediocre regular season by his standards this year, then it might be time to dock him a tier and put him with the rest. But the thing, he's just so consistent in the postseason, besides the Super Bowl, ironically enough. And that sounds weird to say about a guy that has 3 rings and 3 Super Bowl MVPs, but the Super Bowl has been the only round of the playoffs where he's been mortal. I don't think enough people understand this. In the conference playoffs, in terms of getting to the Super Bowl, he is by far the greatest quarterback of all time. In the conference playoffs, he is by far the greatest quarterback ever, and he might be the best player in sports history if you just look at his numbers in the conference playoffs. He's never lost a game in regulation. He's 14-2, and he has 36 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, and his passer rating is completely off the charts. So his consistency come playoff time, getting his team in the playoffs, getting his team to the Super Bowl, there's no other quarterback that does that. And for all the talk about, oh, he has so many weapons and stuff, like he's won more Super Bowls without Tyreek Hill than he did with Tyreek Hill. I've always said this, just a little tangent side rant. People place too much emphasis on weapons and not enough emphasis on defense, field position, and the line of scrimmage. Because ironically enough, the line of scrimmage and the failure getting dominated at the line of scrimmage is really the biggest reason why Mahomes lost 2 Super Bowls and why he got blown out last year by the Eagles, because my team, the Eagles, dominated the Chiefs at the line of scrimmage last year in the Super Bowl. But Mahomes is the main character, and we all know it. And as long as he is healthy and playing, the Chiefs are going to be a threat and a favorite to win the Super Bowl every year. Not because of Andy Reid, not because of Travis Kelce or Mr. Taylor Swift, but because of number 15 and because of how consistent he is in the playoffs, getting to the Super Bowl, and also how clutch he's been in Super Bowls that weren't blowouts. He's got 3 game-winning drives in the Super Bowl. The only thing missing from his resume is a super dominant Super Bowl performance, like a 400-yard, 5-touchdown type of game. That's the only thing he really lacks. But again, he's got 3 rings and 3 Super Bowl MVPs already, so he's already accomplished everything. He's not really competing against his peers. He's competing against ghosts, and that's how you know he's the best.